to 10 to 8. Now, 40 years ago, the first AIDS-related death was reported, and it went on to claim thousands of lives throughout the 80s and 90s, many of them young gay men.
This year, to mark World AIDS Day, there's a very special exhibition in Liverpool honouring all those lives that were lost. Our Josh Parry is there and can tell us all about it. Morning, Josh.
Good morning, Sally from Liverpool. Well, I am here at a particularly special exhibition to mark a particularly special World AIDS Day. As you say, it has been 40 years since the first reported AIDS-related death in the UK, and here in Liverpool, they are commemorating that with a display of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. Now, these quilts are a grassroots project to commemorate and celebrate the lives of those we lost during the AIDS crisis. At the time of their death, there was no official formal recognition, so people from the LGBT+ community rallied around and created these beautiful quilt panels that have been on display around the world. Here in the UK, by the early 90s, we had our own UK AIDS Memorial Quilt, and this one that you're seeing right now is to remember Brian King. It is a beautiful quilt created by his best friends Jocelyn and Jerry. Now, back in '96, 25 years ago, they sent it off to be displayed in an exhibition and thought they would never see it again. Well, earlier this week, I had the privilege of being there when they were reunited with it. Take a look at this.
I remember seeing him for the first time.
This is a story of friendship.
Falling into the room, laughing his head off, with a great big sort of long scarf on.
Kind of bumped into each other, and from that moment on, we gelled in a way that I'd never experienced with anybody else ever since. And we were suddenly Brian and Jerry, and we stayed Brian and Jerry until the day he died.
When Jocelyn and Jerry met Brian, the bond was instant.
The amazing thing about Brian was that he made everybody feel like that. He had the capacity to make everybody in a room feel like they were the most important person in the room to him.
Together, they discovered Liverpool's gay scene.
Brian took me to my first club. He dressed me up and backcombed my hair, and somehow we managed to get in.
And someone did that with a little shutter to let us in, and we were in. And as soon as we went in, and we just dived on the dance floor and never looked back. It felt like there wasn't anything we couldn't do.
It felt like the world was waiting, basically.
Obviously, later in that period, quite a lot changed.
Suddenly we started to hear, I think it was in the Pink paper or whatever paper it was, that there was this disease killing Americans, and we couldn't think that there was a disease just killing gays, you just didn't think that. And then suddenly it happened.
There was that look of, thinness that sort of, I remember being really sort of overwhelmed by that.
There was Vinnie and Colin, who were two wonderful gay men, camp, zhuzhy, leathery, wonderful, and they died. And it wasn't until then that we realised something really big and all-encompassing was going on. Everything changed.
Do you remember when Brian told you that he'd found out he was HIV positive?
It was incredibly strange because I saw him and I immediately knew it was positive. I just looked at me and I just looked at him, and we stopped being the Brian and Jerry we always were. We immediately stopped being young.
I just sort of had to kind of pretend it was all going to be fine, but at the same time it was sort of like a blow to the stomach.
Brian died aged 29, 1 year before life-saving treatment for HIV would become widely available. And in the face of fear and grief and hopelessness, this is how the world tried to remember.
I've sort of been to see a few of the showings of the quilt and wondered if I might see Brian's, but it's never been out on exhibit.
And now, obviously, it's going on display in Liverpool. Do you want to come and see it for the first time in 25 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time, I think.
How are you both feeling?
It is overwhelming, and I feel quite shaky, to be honest.
It's stunning.
It has aged well.
I hope we've aged as well as it.
And it is just beautiful to see how proud Jerry and Jocelyn are of the quilt that they made in memory of a friend. But it's important today on World AIDS Day to remember that not everyone could live quite so openly with their HIV status. This quilt here in particular seems particularly poignant today. It was made for a friend by a friend, as you can see there. However, the stigma that prevails around this disease still exists today, and there was a request from their family to have it removed from the quilt. Obviously that wasn't possible without damaging the other panels, so instead it remains here, covered up with a quilt, and it will remain that way until the day that the stigma ends. Now, somebody who knows a lot more about that is Serena Kavanagh. She joins me now from Sahir House, which is a local HIV charity. Serena, we've just heard in that VT the reality of HIV and AIDS during the 80s and 90s. That's not the same reality of HIV today, is it?
No, today if you're diagnosed HIV positive, on effective treatment, you cannot pass the virus on. So it's a campaign called U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. And it's just an amazing kind of movement in HIV and our journey with it.
And as we've just heard there with this quilt that cannot be displayed, this panel of the quilt rather that cannot be displayed, stigma still prevails today though, doesn't it? How important are these quilts in kind of tackling that stigma and ultimately keeping people safe?
We're working in partnership with 24 Kitchen Streets, enabled us to exhibit the quilts this World AIDS Day. And part of Sahir House's work is challenging that HIV stigma. And this World AIDS Day, we've been asking people to have those conversations, end HIV stigma one conversation at a time. So having the quilts here, hearing the stories of each individual, each panel that's been made for one of those people who've died of HIV-related illness, keeps the stories alive, and we can learn from that and challenge the stigma that people still experience today.
And very quickly, one of the things that we've heard from Brian and Jocelyn and Jerry's story is that this was quite a long time ago now, and some of these stories have been forgotten, haven't they? Yeah. Are you hoping that displaying these quilts might uncover some stories that you might not know about them?
Absolutely. If people remember somebody making a quilt panel or have some letters in relation to a panel, get in touch, bring the documents forward, and we can reunite them with the quilts, just like Jocelyn and Jerry were reunited with Brian's.
Brilliant. So I am going to bring you over now to Graham, and it is important to remember that these quilts are a living memorial to those who lost their lives during the AIDS crisis, but many of them, when they were in hospital, when they were being treated, the stigma was so much that they wouldn't be named or perhaps gave in false names. Graham here is a textile artist from Liverpool who has created a panel of the quilt to remember those people who couldn't be named. Graham, tell me quickly how important that is.
It's really important because, like what you've just shown before, you know, there's a lot of people who can't be named due to stigma, so this quilt for me personally was a reaction to that, to celebrate the people that can't be named, give them a quilt of their own that people can come to. It can be pretty much whatever it needs to be for the individual.
It's absolutely beautiful. How long has it taken for you to make? You can see the love that's gone into it. It's
taken about 2 weeks and a lot of, you know, a lot of reflection as well, you know, for me personally, somebody living with HIV, about what it is the condition is linked to in terms of heritage and the people that have passed. So it's been quite an emotional experience to kind of go through the motions of probably what people did experience through the sewing bees back in the 80s and early 90s.
Thank you very much. These quilts obviously will be on display for the next 5 days here in Liverpool, but their legacy will reach much beyond that. They are being remembered online using a QR code system so that they can be a truly international memorial and hopefully help tackle some of that stigma.
They're beautiful. Josh, thanks very much indeed.
Today, of course, World AIDS Day.